I'm also going to start with a poem. The poem was written in 1917 by Vladimir Mayakovsky, and it's called Call to Account. The drum of war thunders and thunders. It calls, thrust iron into the living. From every country, slave after slave are thrown onto bayonet steel. For the sake of what? The earth shivers, hungry and stripped. Mankind is vaporized in a bloodbath, only so someone, somewhere, can get hold of Albania. Human gangs bound in malice. Blow after blow strikes the world, only for someone's vessels to pass without charge through the Bosphorus. Soon the world won't have a rib intact, and its soul will be pulled out and trampled down, only for someone to lay their hands on Mesopotamia. Why does a boot crush the earth, fissured and rough? What is above the battle sky? Freedom. Freedom? God? Money. When will you stand to your full height? You giving them your life? When will you hurl a question to their faces? Why are we fighting? So of course, his call was answered in 1917. 1917 was the year, of course, when the first anti-war government came into power in Russia and took Russia out of the war, greatly reducing the length of the war. It was the year that conscription was imposed in Canada, when the whole idea that people should happily go off to be slaughtered on the killing fields of Europe could no longer hold enough, could not, they just could not recruit people anymore. It was the year when you had a huge opposition to conscription in Quebec. It was a year of resistance in Canada, and here too in the western provinces, where the farmers and others marched against conscription. And after the war, the spirit never again expressed that conscience. The conscience of the 20,000 men in Britain who refused to go to war and who they tried to force to go and fight by imposing death sentences, which they later commuted. The opposition which took place all over the world. We think of this as a European war, but there was 1.5 million soldiers from India. And those same soldiers who were sent off into the trenches without even a winter coat, when they came back, when the people of India started to agitate and fight for freedom, for democracy, for peace, you had the huge slaughters which took place. You had uprisings in Africa, in what is today Mali, where the people refused to be conscripted as slaves to go and fight in the war on behalf of the imperialists. You had the most beautiful statement, courageous statement by a Jamaican living in London who refused to go to war, and who said, "You're going to send me to fight Belgium?" The King of Belgium, who had killed 10 million Africans in the rubber plantations, they're burning their villages, and this is called peace and freedom. So this was not a war in which Canada came of age to be part of the world of peace, or even to sit at the war table. It was a war to redivide the world, to take the empires and redivide them, and to deprive people of the world of their right to freedom. It was also a war to deprive people of their right to conscience, which is the most precious thing there is. Because if you as a human being do not have your right to think and speak and act according to your conscience. That is the most human thing there is. And the most inhuman thing there is to deprive people of that. At that time, whether we're talking about Canada or Britain or India or Africa, the brutal laws were put in place to deprive people of that right to conscience. So it is the same today. When the wars which are taking place and the much more wide-scale wars which are being prepared, also the preparations are being made to deny people their right to conscience. To make, for example, the demand to get out of NATO, to suggest that somehow the people who demand these things are the unpatriotic. It's the most patriotic thing there is to say that we in Canada should fight for an anti-war government, that we in Canada have to learn from this experience of the First World War and all the wars which have taken place since that time for domination of the world, to deny peoples of the world their right to decide, to re-divide the world, and the fight today which is taking place, for example, to re-divide Africa all over again. And we're told Canadian troops are there to defend peace, freedom, and democracy. And it's no more true today than it was 100 years ago. So we have a big responsibility to express our conscience and to do the work that's necessary so that we work for an anti-war government in Canada, so that we raise on our banners to get Canada out of NATO and NORAD, that we refuse to allow Canada to be part of U.S. Homeland Security and the whole Fortress North America, that we demand that Canada stop selling arms which are used to slaughter the people of Yemen and other such arms. There are so many arms sales in Canada, you know, we don't even record the arms which are sold to the United States to use as weapons of mass destruction. To demand that Canada have a foreign policy which supports the rights of the people of the world to their independence, to their national sovereignty, to the right to divide, and upholds the United Nations principles, to fight for the renewal of the United Nations, not as a tool of the big powers, but as a force for peace, and to establish our anti-war government in Canada, to oppose the militarization of our economy. We want to invest in those things which uplift people, which meet the needs of people, not for war and destruction. So we have a huge responsibility to reflect, to remember all those who died in World War I, the 60,000 Canadians who died. You know, half of the people who went to the trenches of World War I either died or came back grievously injured, and that doesn't even count those who came back never the same because of their what they called in those days shell shock, what we call PTSD, or we know as PTSD. So 100, we remember them, we remember the people, the millions of people who died on the world scale, not just those who were fighting, but the civilians. There were more civilians killed even than the people killed actually in the armed forces. We remember them, and we remember them by saying never again, and giving meaning to that never again, that it means our responsibility to bring about that change which is needed so that we establish that anti-war government in Canada. Thank you very much.